The marble countertops gleamed under the kitchen lights as I signed the final divorce papers. 40 years of marriage ended with a stroke of a pen. Thomas had already moved out 3 months ago into the downtown penthouse with Amber, his 29-year-old marketing director, the same penthouse I had helped design when we first struck gold with Anderson Enterprises. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Mrs. Anderson, would you like a moment? The lawyer's voice pulled me back to reality. No need. And it's Eleanor Mitchell now. I slid the papers across the table. I've had 40 years of moments. I think that's quite enough. The next morning, as Thomas prepared to announce his new CEO, undoubtedly Amber, I opened my laptop and began typing the email that would shake the foundations of the empire everyone thought he had built alone. Pittsburgh, 1982. That's where our story began. I was 23, fresh out of business school with a marketing degree and big dreams. The economic recession was hitting hard, but I managed to land an interview at Stewart & Hayes, a small but promising advertising firm. Their office occupied the 3rd floor of a weathered brick building downtown. Nothing fancy but respectable enough. The waiting area buzzed with nervous energy as 5 other candidates and I awaited our turns. When the receptionist called Eleanor Mitchell, I straightened my navy blazer, a splurge from my graduation money, and walked in with confidence I didn't entirely feel. Thomas Anderson sat behind a modest desk, his tie slightly loosened, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. At 32, he looked like someone out of a business magazine, sharp features, calculating hazel eyes, and a smile that somehow managed to be both charming and intimidating. So, Eleanor, tell me why I should hire you when I have candidates with twice your experience waiting outside. I placed my portfolio on his desk. Because while they're thinking about what worked yesterday, I'm focusing on what will work tomorrow. The market is changing. People don't want to be sold anymore. They want to be understood. He raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. And you understand them? Better than most. May I? I gestured to his phone. He nodded, curious. I dialed the radio station that was playing softly in the background. Hello, WPTT. This is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm sitting in an interview right now and wondering if you could play Don't Stop Believin' by Journey? It would really make my point. Yes, I'll hold. Thomas laughed, clearly surprised. What are you doing? Demonstrating my approach. Advertising isn't just about reaching people. It's about connecting with them at the right moment. Within minutes, the familiar piano intro played through the radio. Thomas shook his head in disbelief. You just cold called a radio station during your job interview. And they accepted my request. That's the connection. That's what I can bring to your clients. I got the job. Within 6 months, Thomas and I were not just colleagues, but a team. I brought fresh ideas. He had the business acumen to execute them. We landed Riverside Breweries, a struggling local beer manufacturer, as our first major client together. Their sales had been declining for years as imported beers gained popularity. They need to embrace their roots, not run from them, I explained, as Thomas and I brainstormed in the office after hours. Pittsburgh is a steel town built on hard work. Their grandfather started brewing during the Depression. That's their story. The working man's reward, Thomas said, building on my concept. Simple, authentic, local. The campaign was a stunning success. Riverside's sales increased by 60% in 3 months. More clients followed. Within a year, Thomas was made partner, and I was promoted to creative director. Our professional relationship evolved into something more one rainy October evening. We were celebrating after landing the Carrington department store account, our biggest yet. Champagne flowed at Mallory's, a cozy bistro downtown. As we walked to my apartment after dinner, Thomas stopped under the awning of a closed flower shop. Eleanor, I think we make a hell of a team. The best in Pittsburgh, I agreed, rain pattering around us. I'm not just talking about work. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch lingering. I've never met anyone who challenges me the way you do, who makes me see things differently. Our first kiss tasted of champagne and possibility. We married in the spring of 1984, a small ceremony at his parents' home in Sewickley. The merger of our personal lives seemed to accelerate our professional ambitions. Thomas had been talking about breaking away from Stewart & Hayes, starting our own agency. I was hesitant at first. The security of established clients was comforting. In an unstable economy. "We'll take the risk together," he promised, his arm around my waist as we stood on the balcony of our new apartment. Anderson Advertising. Or maybe Mitchell & Anderson. Anderson Advertising sounds stronger, I conceded. Cleaner. His smile widened. We'll make it the best boutique agency in Pennsylvania. We launched in 1985 with 3 small clients who followed us from Stewart & Hayes. Our office was a converted warehouse space in the Strip District, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Thomas handled client relations and business development. I led creative strategy and campaign execution. We hired 2 junior copywriters and a graphic designer. It was small, scrappy, and exhilarating. The breakthrough came when I secured a meeting with Westbrook Hotels, a regional chain looking to expand nationally. Their marketing director had been underwhelmed by pitches from larger agencies. "They're thinking too conventionally," I told Thomas as we prepared our presentation. "Westbrook needs to position itself as the sophisticated traveler's discovery, not just another hotel chain." "The hidden gem," Thomas nodded, adding notes to our pitch. "Exactly. Discover the difference," as the tagline. We showcase the unique character of each location instead of standardization. Thomas paced our office, energized. "Eleanor, this could put us on the map." We worked through the night, fine-tuning the pitch. I remember the sunrise streaming through the windows as we rehearsed one final time, exhausted but determined. We won the account. Westbrook Hotels became our flagship client, and their successful expansion validated our approach. Anderson Advertising grew rapidly, adding staff and moving to larger offices downtown. By 1990, we had 28 employees and a reputation for innovative campaigns that delivered results. Success brought its challenges. Thomas became increasingly focused on the business side, meeting with bankers, negotiating office space, discussing growth strategies. I maintained creative oversight, but missed our collaborative sessions. The distance between our roles widened subtly but steadily. The pivotal moment came in 1992, when Caldwell Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate, approached us not for advertising, but for consultation on their entire marketing strategy. "They're offering 3 times our usual fee," Thomas explained, excitement in his voice. "This could be our entry into corporate consulting. Higher margins, more prestigious clients. But we're an advertising agency," I countered. "Creativity is our strength. We're whatever we need to be to grow, Eleanor. The market is evolving. The Caldwell project marked our transition from Anderson Advertising to Anderson Enterprises, AI full-service business consultancy with marketing as just one division." Thomas's vision expanded rapidly. He hired MBAs from top schools, former consultants from major firms. Our creative team became a smaller piece of a growing corporate structure. I adapted, recognizing the opportunity. When Thomas suggested we develop proprietary business analytics software to enhance our consulting services, I supported the investment despite the financial risk. My background in consumer behavior proved valuable in designing metrics that truly captured market trends. Pattern Track, I named the software during development. Because it identifies behavioral patterns before they become obvious market trends. Thomas loved it. Pattern Track by Anderson Enterprises. It has a nice ring to it. The software's success surpassed our expectations. Major retailers and manufacturers licensed it, generating revenue beyond our consulting fees. By 1998, Anderson Enterprises had offices in Chicago, New York, and Atlanta. Our staff numbered over 200. Through it all, Thomas and I maintained our partnership, though our roles had evolved. He became the public face of the company, speaking at conferences, appearing in business publications. I worked more behind the scenes, overseeing strategic initiatives and maintaining the creative culture that had been our foundation. At home, we balanced each other. Thomas's intensity needed my grounding influence. My occasional doubts were countered by his unwavering confidence. We built a beautiful Tudor-style home in Fox Chapel, entertained clients and friends, discussed business over morning coffee and wine-filled dinners. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. In 2001, we faced our greatest challenge when the tech bubble burst. Several major clients scaled back their consulting budgets. Pattern Track sales plateaued as companies froze technology investments. "We might need to cut staff," Thomas said grimly one evening, reviewing financial projections in our home office. "Or we pivot," I countered. "The market will stabilize, but consumer habits are changing permanently. Companies will need guidance, navigating the new landscape." I proposed a reduced fee model for existing clients, supplemented with performance-based incentives. It was risky. We'd take an immediate revenue hit. But it would maintain relationships until the economy recovered. "We can't afford to lose our top talent," I argued. "They're our real asset." Thomas hesitated, but ultimately agreed. "You've got good instincts, Elle. You always have." The strategy worked. While competitors downsized, we retained our key people and client relationships. When the market improved, we were positioned to expand while others rebuilt. This pattern continued through the years, Thomas pushing for aggressive growth, me providing strategic counterbalance. We weathered the 2008 financial crisis using similar principles. By our 30th anniversary in 2014, Anderson Enterprises had become a global consultancy valued at over $300 million, with offices on 3 continents. Success changed Thomas in subtle ways. The hungry entrepreneur evolved into a polished CEO. He developed a taste for luxury, custom suits, rare wines, elite social circles. I maintained my focus on our business foundations rather than its trappings. The first hairline fractures in our marriage appeared around this time. Thomas began attending industry events solo, explaining that I'd find them tedious. Our conversations drifted from business strategy to surface-level updates. The intellectual partnership that had defined us slowly eroded. In 2018, Thomas hired Amber Donovan as our marketing director. At 29, she was brilliant and ambitious. Stanford MBA, experience at a top Silicon Valley firm, impressive portfolio. I recognized her talent immediately and mentored her through her early months with us. "She reminds me of you," Thomas commented after her successful presentation to our executive team. "That same spark." I took it as a compliment then. The warning signs accumulated slowly. Late strategy sessions, business trips that extended mysteriously, text messages that made Thomas smile privately. I ignored them, focusing instead on our upcoming European expansion and the development of Pattern Track 4.0. Anderson Enterprises continued its upward trajectory. We acquired 3 smaller consultancies, integrated their operations, and expanded our service offerings. Pattern Track evolved into an AI-powered system that could predict consumer behavior with remarkable accuracy. Thomas received accolades: Visionary CEO, Business Leader of the Decade. My contributions remained largely unacknowledged outside our company. In November 2022, approaching our 40th anniversary, Thomas asked me to meet him for dinner at Mallory's, our old celebration spot, though it had since transformed into an upscale establishment. I arrived to find him already seated, looking uncomfortable yet determined. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine, made small talk about the business, then placed his hand over mine. "Eleanor, we need to talk about us." The familiar phrases followed. Growing apart. Different visions. The passionate phrase, "I didn't plan for this to happen," that somehow always features in such conversations. "It's Amber," I said flatly, not needing confirmation. "We've developed feelings for each other," he admitted, his tone suggesting this was somehow inevitable, perhaps even appropriate. "I'll always care for you, Eleanor. You've been my partner through everything. But I need something new," I finished for him. The cliché was almost more painful than the betrayal. The separation proceeded with clinical efficiency. Thomas moved into the downtown penthouse while corporate attorneys prepared settlement terms. The board was informed that our personal changes wouldn't affect business operations. Staff received a carefully worded email about mutual decisions and continued professional collaboration. I maintained my dignity publicly while processing my rage privately. 40 years of marriage, concluding with such predictable banality. But beyond the personal betrayal, something else crystallized in my mind: the systematic minimization of my contributions to Anderson Enterprises. Throughout the negotiations, Thomas's attorneys repeatedly referenced his company and his vision. The narrative had become so entrenched that even our long-term employees spoke of Mr. Anderson's business acumen as the cornerstone of our success. The final insult came when Thomas announced a special board meeting to name his successor as CEO, his retirement gift to himself as he approached 65. "I think you know who it will be," he said during one of our final conversations, not even bothering to hide his intentions regarding Amber. "She has the right energy to take the company forward." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Energy is certainly important. That evening, alone in the house we had shared for decades, I opened my old files. Original campaign concepts for our first clients, strategy documents for Westbrook Hotels, the initial design specifications for Pattern Track, email threads showing critical business decisions where my judgment had proven decisive. Records of client relationships I had nurtured while Thomas focused on expansion. The pattern was clear. My fingerprints were on every significant success in the company's history, yet the public narrative attributed everything to Thomas's genius. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the board of directors, our executive team, and key shareholders. Its subject line was simple: The Untold History of Anderson Enterprises. By morning, everything would change. I worked through the night, my fingers flying across the keyboard as decades of memories, achievements, and slights crystallized into clear, undeniable evidence. The house felt eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Dawn broke as I finished the email, attaching key documents that validated every claim. I hesitated before clicking send, not out of doubt, but to savor the moment. For 40 years, I had been the wind beneath Thomas's wings. Now I would show the world who had really been doing the flying. The email went to all 23 board members, our executive leadership team, and the major shareholders who held more than 5% of Anderson Enterprises. I also included a few select business journalists who had previously profiled Thomas as a self-made success. The subject line was straightforward: The Untold History of Anderson Enterprises. With one click, the message disappeared into cyberspace. I closed my laptop, made a cup of coffee, and sat on the back terrace overlooking the gardens I had designed. The morning sun filtered through maple trees, creating dappled patterns on the flagstone. Birds chattered in the hedges. The world continued, turning, unaware that a seismic shift had just occurred. My phone rang exactly 17 minutes later. The screen displayed Martin Calloway, chairman of our board and Thomas's golf buddy for the past 15 years. Eleanor, his voice was measured but tense. I've received your email. And you've read it, I presume? Parts of it. It's comprehensive. 40. Years usually is. He cleared his throat. The board meeting is scheduled for 10 this morning. Thomas is planning to announce his retirement and nominate Amber Donovan as CEO. I'm aware. Given the information you've shared, perhaps we should postpone. No, I interrupted firmly. The meeting should proceed exactly as planned. I'll be attending. A pause. You haven't been to a board meeting in over 2 years. An oversight, I'm correcting. Today. After hanging up, I walked to my closet and selected a crimson St. John suit. Conservative cut, undeniable power. Thomas had always preferred me in pastels. Today was not about his preferences. As I dressed, my phone lit up repeatedly. Board members, executive team. Our corporate counsel, Nathan Pierce, left 3 messages, each more urgent than the last. I responded to none of them. At precisely 9:45, I pulled into the reserved parking space at Anderson Tower, the gleaming 50-story building in downtown Pittsburgh that housed our corporate headquarters. The security guard did a double-take as I approached. "Mrs. Anderson, good morning." "Good morning, Frank. And it's Ms. Mitchell now." The executive elevator whisked me to the 48th floor. The reception area of our executive suite fell silent as I entered. Jenna, who had been our executive assistant for 12 years, stared open-mouthed. "Ms. Mitchell, we weren't expecting you." "Clearly. Is everyone in the boardroom?" "Most of the board has arrived. Mr. Anderson is in his office with Ms. Donovan and Mr. Pierce. Perfect timing, then." The boardroom featured a massive oval table of polished walnut with 26 leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and the 3 rivers converging at its heart. I had selected the furniture, the artwork, even the particular shade of blue-gray for the walls, designed to promote calm discussion while maintaining alertness. As I entered, 14 board members were already seated, engaged in hushed conversations that stopped abruptly. Their expressions ranged from awkward discomfort to barely concealed fascination. Eleanor, Rebecca Winters, one of our longest-serving board members, stood to greet me. "It's wonderful to see you." Others murmured similar sentiments, their eyes betraying their unease. I took a seat at the far end of the table, not my usual place beside Thomas's chair, but strategically positioned to observe everyone's reactions. At 10:02, Thomas entered with Amber and Nathan in tow. He stopped short at the sight of me, his face registering shock before settling into a practiced neutral expression. Amber had less control, her eyes widening as she clutched the portfolio in her hands more tightly. "Eleanor." Thomas nodded curtly. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Evidently," I replied, matching his tone. "Please don't let me interrupt the proceedings." Martin called the meeting to order, his gavel striking the sound block with unusual tentativeness. The regular agenda items passed in a blur of tension. Financial, reports, quarterly projections, market analyses. No one mentioned the email. Everyone knew what was coming. Finally, Martin turned to Thomas. "I believe you have an announcement, Tom." Thomas straightened his Hermes tie, a recent affectation, and surveyed the room with the confidence of a man who believed history would bend to his will. "As you all know, I'll be turning 65 next month. After 4 decades leading Anderson, enterprises from a small advertising agency to a global consultancy, I've decided it's time to pass the torch." His practiced speech rolled out smoothly. "This company has been my life's work, my legacy." I didn't flinch at the singular pronouns. "Not yet." "Succession planning has been my priority for the past 2 years," he continued. "We need leadership that understands our history but isn't constrained by it. Someone with vision, energy, and innovative thinking." Amber straightened in her chair, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Therefore, I'm nominating Amber Donovan as the next Chief Executive Officer of Anderson Enterprises, effective immediately upon my retirement next month." Murmurs rippled around the table, not of surprise at the nomination, but of uncertainty given the morning's revelations. Thomas either didn't notice or chose to ignore the muted response. Amber has demonstrated exceptional leadership since joining us. Her strategic insight and forward-thinking approach mirror the principles that built this company. He gestured for her to stand. I have complete confidence that under her guidance, Anderson Enterprises will reach new heights. Amber rose, composed, yet visibly thrilled. Thank you, Thomas. I'm honored by your faith in me. Martin cleared his throat. Before we proceed with discussion of this nomination, there's another matter the board needs to address. He glanced at me. This morning, we received information from Eleanor that bears directly on this succession decision and on our understanding of the company's history. Thomas's jaw tightened. Whatever personal grievances my ex-wife, I interjected. Whatever personal grievances Eleanor harbors shouldn't impact business decisions of this magnitude. Rebecca Winters leaned forward. Thomas, have you read her email? I've been informed of its general content, he replied dismissively. Then perhaps you should, said Martin, sliding a printed copy across the table. And the board should review the supporting documentation more thoroughly before voting on secession. Thomas skimmed the first page, his complexion darkening. This is absurd. Eleanor was certainly involved in the business, but these claims are fully substantiated. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. All heads turned toward me. Every assertion in that document is supported by evidence: emails, contracts, strategy documents, meeting minutes, patent applications. You'll find it quite comprehensive. Nathan Pierce, our corporate counsel, shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor has raised some legitimate points about intellectual property and corporate governance that require examination. This is nothing but vindictiveness. Thomas slapped the paper down. Eleanor is upset about our divorce and— Let me stop you there, Thomas, I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. This isn't about our marriage or its end. It's about historical accuracy and proper recognition of contributions. I stood, buttoning my jacket as I addressed the board. For 40 years, I've been content to work behind the scenes. The spotlight didn't interest me. Building something meaningful did. But I will not allow my life's work to be erased or attributed to someone else, even if that someone is the man I spent 4 decades beside. I moved to the center of the room, commanding full attention. Pattern Track wasn't Thomas's brainchild. It was mine. The initial algorithm, the consumer behavior metrics, the predictive modeling approaches, all developed from my research. I have the original notebooks and development logs to prove it. Thomas started to protest, but I continued. The European expansion strategy implemented in 2020? My work for 18 months before Thomas presented it to the board as his vision. The successful pivot during the 2008 financial crisis. My risk assessment model and client retention strategy, which Thomas initially resisted. I gestured to the digital display on the wall. May I? Martin nodded, and I connected my laptop to project a series of documents, emails, strategy papers, original concept sketches for campaigns and products that had defined our company. The Westbrook Hotels campaign that put Anderson Advertising on the map? My concept? My execution? The transition from advertising to full business consultancy? A joint decision, not Thomas's unilateral vision. The acquisition of Mitchell Analytics in 2015? I identified the opportunity and structured the deal before Thomas made the first phone call. The room remained silent as I methodically presented evidence of my central role in every pivotal moment of the company's history. Not erasing Thomas's contributions, but rightfully claiming my own. I haven't come here seeking revenge, I concluded. I've come seeking the truth. Anderson Enterprises wasn't built by Thomas Anderson. It was built by both of us, through equal partnership and complementary skills. I turned directly to Thomas, whose face had lost its confident mask. "You're an extraordinary salesman, Thomas. You sold our clients on our services. You sold the public on your image. Eventually, you even sold yourself on a narrative that minimized my role until you believed I was dispensable, professionally and personally." Facing the board again, I softened my tone. "I'm not here to block Amber's nomination or force my way back into leadership. I'm simply ensuring that as this company moves forward, it does so with an honest understanding of its foundations." Rebecca Winters broke the silence. "What are you asking for, Eleanor?" "3 things. First, formal recognition of my role as co-founder of Anderson Enterprises in all corporate history and communications moving forward. Second, proper attribution for Pattern Track, including documentation of my primary role in its development. Third, a board seat independent of my former position as Thomas's wife, based solely on my contributions to this company." Martin Calloway nodded slowly. "These seem like reasonable requests given the evidence." Thomas finally found his voice. "This is blackmail." "No," I corrected him. "This is accountability." Amber had remained silent throughout my presentation, her expression shifting from disbelief to grudging respect. Now she spoke. "If what Eleanor has presented is accurate, and it appears to be, then acknowledging her contributions isn't just right, it's essential for the company's integrity." Her unexpected support shifted the energy in the room. Thomas looked betrayed. "The board needs time to review all this information properly," Martin announced. "I propose we adjourn until tomorrow morning and reconvene with a full assessment of Eleanor's documentation." "And the CEO nomination?" Thomas demanded. "Will be considered in light of complete information," Martin replied firmly. "As it should be." As the meeting disbanded, board members approached me one by one, some apologetic for not recognizing my role sooner, others diplomatically non-committal until they'd reviewed everything. Rebecca Winters squeezed my hand. "It's about time, Eleanor." Thomas waited until the room cleared before approaching. His voice was low, controlled, but seething with anger. Was humiliating me in front of the board really necessary? Was taking credit for my work for decades really necessary? I countered. Was leaving me for a woman half my age really necessary? This isn't about Amber. You're right. It's not about her. It's not even about you anymore. It's about the truth. I gathered my materials. You know what's ironic, Thomas? I never wanted public recognition. I was content working as a team. You're the one who taught me that sometimes you have to stand up and claim your place in the story. "The board won't side with you against me," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "They'll side with evidence and facts. That's all I'm asking them to do." As I walked out, Amber Donovan was waiting by the elevator. Her composed facade had cracked slightly, revealing genuine curiosity. "Why now?" she asked bluntly. "You could have done this years ago." "Because until now, I still believed in our partnership, professional and personal. I understood that Thomas needed the spotlight more than I did." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. But I draw the line at being written out of the story altogether. As the doors began to close, I added, "By the way, I meant what I said. I'm not opposing your nomination. Just make sure that when you take the reins, you know whose work you're really building upon." The elevator descended and I felt a weight lifting with each floor. Whatever happened tomorrow, the truth was finally out. I exited the building into the bright spring sunshine. Pedestrians hurried past, consumed by their own concerns, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding 50 floors above. A young woman passed by, speaking animatedly on her phone about a presentation she'd developed that her boss had presented as his own. I smiled to myself. Perhaps my story will reach her someday. That evening, my phone rang constantly. Reporters seeking comments. Former colleagues expressing support or shock. Even our children, Jonathan and Melissa, called from their respective homes in Boston and San Francisco, confused by the sudden upheaval. "Mom, what's going on?" Jonathan asked. "Dad's assistant called to cancel our dinner next week because of a family situation," I explained as simply as I could, avoiding vilifying their father while being honest about my actions. "It's about time," Melissa said finally. "I've watched you dodge credit my entire life." "It wasn't always like that," I clarified. "In the beginning, we were true partners. But that changed," she insisted. "And you let it happen." Her words stung, because they contained truth. I had allowed my contributions to be gradually obscured, prioritizing harmony over recognition. The comfortable narrative of Thomas as visionary and me as supportive spouse had calcified over decades until it became the accepted history. As night fell, I sat in my study reviewing old photographs, Thomas and I at the opening of our first office, celebrating major client wins, receiving industry awards. In most images, he stood slightly ahead, I slightly behind. The visual metaphor wasn't subtle. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Amber. Can we meet tomorrow before the board reconvenes? Just the two of us." I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. 7:30 a.m., Rosedale Cafe on 5th. Her reply came instantly. "I'll be there." Sleep eluded me that night, not from anxiety, but from a strange, buoyant energy, the feeling of having finally spoken a truth long suppressed. Whatever came next, I had reclaimed my voice and my place in the narrative I had helped create. The future of Anderson Enterprises, and who would lead it into that future, remains uncertain. But one thing was clear: its history would never be told the same way again. Rosedale Cafe opened at 6 a.m. to serve the early downtown crowd. By 7:15, I had claimed a corner table with a view of both the entrance and the street. The morning rush had subsided. Business professionals clutching briefcases and travel mugs had collected their orders and disappeared into the awakening city. I selected this venue deliberately, public enough to prevent any heated exchanges, quiet enough for candid conversation. The elderly owner, Vincent, had known Thomas and me since our early days, when we could barely afford his gourmet coffee. He nodded respectfully as he brought my usual black coffee and a warm almond croissant. "The other lady called to say she's running 5 minutes late," he informed me. "Blonde, young, said you'd know her." "Thank you, Vincent." At precisely 7:35, Amber Donovan entered, scanning the cafe before spotting me. She wore a tailored navy pantsuit with minimal jewelry, professional, understated, deliberate. Her expression was composed, but tension showed in her slightly rigid posture as she approached. "Good morning, Eleanor. Thank you for meeting me. Coffee? Vincent makes the best in Pittsburgh. Just green tea if they have it." Once Vincent had delivered her tea and retreated, Amber placed her portfolio on the table and met my gaze directly. "I spent the night reviewing your documentation." This surprised me. "The board hasn't released it yet." A slight smile crossed her face. "I have my sources. Let's just say Thomas isn't the only one with loyal colleagues." "And your conclusion?" "That I've been operating under false assumptions about the company I thought I understood." She cupped, her hands around the teacup. "Why didn't you speak up sooner? All those executive meetings where Thomas presented your ideas as his own. You just sat there." The question wasn't accusatory. Genuine curiosity colored her tone. "Marriage and business. Partnerships both require compromise," I replied. "In the beginning, it was strategic. Thomas excelled at commanding attention, inspiring confidence. I preferred developing ideas to selling them. It was efficient, each of us leveraging our strengths. And later? Later it became a habit, then an expectation, then." I paused, tracing the rim of my coffee cup. "Then invisible. The contributions of women often are, especially of a certain generation." Amber nodded slowly. I've experienced that myself, though obviously not to the same extent. That's partly why I'm addressing it now, I acknowledged. For women like you, coming up in business, the pattern needs breaking. She studied me for a moment. That's remarkably generous, considering I'm dating your ex-husband. My issue isn't with you, Amber. It's with dishonesty, Thomas's and, admittedly, my own. I allowed the false narrative to persist. Silence settled between us as she seemed to weigh something in her mind. I have a proposition, she finally said. One that could benefit us both, and ultimately, Anderson Enterprises. I'm listening. I'm still the best candidate for CEO, she stated without arrogance. I have the vision and drive to take the company forward, but I lack historical context, the deep understanding of how Anderson Enterprises evolved and why certain approaches succeeded. And I have that context. Exactly. She leaned forward. Here's my proposal. I'll publicly acknowledge your foundational role in the company and ensure your 3 demands are met. In return, you support my nomination for CEO and agree to serve as a special advisor during my first year, helping me understand the company's DNA while I navigate the transition. I considered her offer. And Thomas? He retires as planned, with appropriate recognition for his actual contributions. No more, no less. Her expression hardened slightly. I admired Thomas, but I won't build my career on false premises. If I take this position, I want it to be clean. And your relationship with him? She straightened, professional mask firmly in place. That's separate from this discussion. I almost smiled at her compartmentalization, so reminiscent of myself at her age. Is it, though? Personal and professional lines blur easily. I learned that the hard way. For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her features. Thomas and that's complicated now. Learning he misrepresented so much. She shook her head. But that's for me to sort through. Today we're discussing the future of Anderson Enterprises. Fair enough. I sipped my coffee, now lukewarm. Your proposal has merit, but I'd add one condition. Pattern Track returns to its original development vision. Meaning? Thomas has been pushing for government surveillance applications, selling our consumer prediction algorithms to agencies for monitoring patterns of suspicious behavior. That was never its intended purpose. Surprise registered on her face. I wasn't aware of those proposals. They haven't reached the board yet. Thomas has been exploring the possibility with defense contractors, positioning it as a national security opportunity. And you object on ethical grounds? On ethical and business grounds, I clarified. Once Pattern Track becomes associated with surveillance, we lose consumer trust. Our brand has always balanced innovation with ethical applications. It's why clients trust us. Amber processed this information, tapping her manicured nails against the table. I agree. Government surveillance contracts might offer short-term revenue but would damage our core business model. She nodded decisively. Done. Pattern Track stays focused on consumer applications and business intelligence. Then, we have an agreement. I extended my hand. She shook it firmly. I'll present our proposal to the board this morning. Our proposal, I repeated with faint amusement, already adopting collaborative language. I learn quickly, she replied with the hint of a smile. One question before we go. If circumstances were different, would you want the CEO position? The question caught me off guard with its directness. No, I answered truthfully. I never wanted to be the public face. I'm most effective at shaping strategy and solving problems, not managing personalities and investor expectations. That's why Thomas succeeded in taking credit, she observed. You didn't want the spotlight he craved. Perhaps. I gathered my belongings. Or perhaps every partnership requires balance. His ambition and my discretion created something neither of us could have built alone. As we exited the cafe, the I Morning sun gilded the city skyline, the same view that had inspired us in the early days of Anderson Advertising. Looking at it now, I felt neither bitterness nor nostalgia, just appreciation for what we had created and determination to preserve its integrity. "One last thing," I said as we prepared to part ways. "Thomas will fight this arrangement. He'll view it as betrayal from both of us." Amber's expression hardened with resolve. "I can handle Thomas." "I'm sure you can," I replied. "Just remember that he's at his most dangerous when cornered." The reconvened board meeting at 10:00 a.m. crackled with tension as members took their seats. Thomas arrived last, flanked by two attorneys I didn't recognize, clearly external counsel rather than our corporate legal team. His expression was granite, eyes refusing to meet mine as he took his seat at the head of the table. Martin Calloway opened the proceedings. "Before we continue yesterday's discussion, I should inform everyone that the board has thoroughly reviewed the documentation provided by Eleanor. Our corporate counsel and an independent verification team worked through the night. Nathan Pierce, our corporate counsel, rose. After examination of electronic records, archived files, original documents, and patent applications, we can confirm that Eleanor's claims regarding her contributions to Anderson Enterprises are substantially accurate." Murmurs rippled around the table. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "This presents both a historical correction and a governance question for this board," Martin continued. "We must address the accurate attribution of corporate achievements while determining leadership succession." Amber raised her hand. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address the board." Martin nodded his assent. Standing with poised confidence, Amber surveyed the room. "In light of the information Eleanor has presented, I've spent considerable time reflecting on the leadership this company needs. This morning, Eleanor and I met to discuss a path forward that honors the past while securing the future." Thomas's head snapped up, his gaze darting between us. "I still believe I'm the right person to lead Anderson Enterprises as CEO," Amber continued. "But I now understand that my vision must incorporate a more accurate understanding of this company's foundations." She outlined our agreement: my board position, formal recognition as co-founder, proper attribution for Pattern Track, and my role as special advisor. As she spoke, Thomas's expression darkened further. "This arrangement honors Eleanor's crucial contributions while allowing the company to move forward with new leadership," Amber concluded. "It represents both historical accuracy and practical governance." Before Martin could respond, Thomas slammed his palm on the table. "This is collusion. While I was preparing for this meeting, the two of you were conspiring behind my back." We're problem-solving," I corrected calmly. "Something this company was built on." "The board won't support this coup," Thomas declared, looking around for allies. "I've led this company for 40 years. "We've led this company for 40 years, I interrupted. "That's precisely the point." Rebecca Winters spoke up. "Thomas, the evidence is clear. Eleanor's contributions have been systematically minimized. This proposal simply corrects that while providing a practical succession plan." "Is that so?" Thomas's voice took on a dangerous edge. "Then let me present some evidence of my own." He nodded to one of his attorneys, who distributed folders to each board member. "What's this?" Martin frowned, opening his copy. "A reminder of who actually owns controlling interest in Anderson Enterprises," Thomas replied. "My personal holdings, plus proxy agreements and voting trusts, give me effective control of 43% of voting shares. Eleanor's settlement left her with only 7%. He leaned forward, triumph flashing in his eyes. "You can acknowledge her contributions all you want, but I determine who leads this company." The room fell silent as board members reviewed the documents. My heart sank as I saw their expressions. Thomas had outmaneuvered us, a harsh reminder that while I focused on building the business, he had carefully structured ownership to maintain control. "The percentages appear accurate," Nathan confirmed reluctantly. "With aligned minority shareholders, Thomas could indeed block any CEO nomination he opposes. Thomas sat back, satisfied. Now, shall we return to my original proposal? I nominate Amber Donovan as CEO, with no special conditions or advisory roles for Eleanor beyond standard board participation. I studied Amber's face, wondering if she would revert to Thomas's ally now that the power dynamics had shifted. Her expression remained unreadable. I withdrew my name from consideration, she announced quietly. The room erupted in surprised exclamations. Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Making an ethical choice," she replied evenly. "I won't lead a company under false pretenses or compromised governance." "This is absurd," Thomas sputtered. "You've worked toward this position for years." "Yes, believing I would earn it honestly." She gathered her materials. "I can find another C-suite position. I can't find another conscience." The strategic implications hit me immediately. Without a nominee, Thomas faced a stalemate. He couldn't force the board to accept someone they didn't support, even with his controlling interest. Martin cleared his throat. "Given these developments, I suggest we table the CEO succession discussion and address the other matters raised by Eleanor. Her formal recognition as co-founder and proper attribution for Pattern Track. Those recognitions are mine to grant, or withhold as majority owner," Thomas countered, his voice cold. "Actually, they're not," Nathan interjected. "While you control voting shares, intellectual property attribution and corporate history are matters of factual record, not shareholder vote. The board has fiduciary responsibility to ensure accurate representation." Thomas glared at our corporate counsel. "Whose side are you on, Nathan?" "The company's," he replied simply, "as I've always been." The discussion devolved into procedural arguments and legal technicalities. Throughout it all, Amber remained silent, her earlier confidence replaced by quiet dignity. Eventually, Martin called for a brief recess. As board members filed out, I noticed Jason Westfield, our CFO and Thomas's longtime ally, approach him with urgent whispers. Thomas's expression shifted from anger to shock to calculation within seconds. When the meeting reconvened 20 minutes later, Thomas had undergone a remarkable transformation. His combative stance had vanished, replaced by somber pragmatism. "During the break, I was informed of some concerning financial projections," he announced. "It seems our Q2 numbers are tracking significantly below expectations." Jason nodded confirmation. "Early indicators suggest we may miss projections by 22 to 28%. Several major clients have indicated they're reviewing their contracts in light of recent developments." The implication was clear. News of internal strife was already affecting client confidence. "In the interest of corporate stability," Thomas continued, "I'm willing to compromise. I propose the following. Eleanor receives formal recognition as co-founder. Pattern Track documentation reflects her primary role in its development. She takes a board seat as agreed." He paused, meeting my eyes for the first time that day. "In exchange, we present a united front to our clients and the public. No disclosures about past misattributions. We simply correct the record moving forward." "And the CEO position?" Martin asked. "I will continue as CEO for 6 additional months while we conduct a proper executive search, one that considers internal and external candidates on equal footing." Thomas glanced at Amber. "Including Ms. Donovan, should she reconsider her withdrawal." The offer surprised me. It wasn't capitulation. Thomas never capitulated, but strategic retreat. He recognized that a prolonged power struggle would damage Anderson Enterprises, devaluing his own largest asset. "I can accept those terms," I said after careful consideration. "With one addition, Pattern Track development returns to its original, consumer-focused mission. No surveillance applications." Thomas studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Agreed." "Ms. Donovan?" Martin turned to Amber. Would you consider remaining with the company under these circumstances? She hesitated, looking between Thomas and me. I'll stay through the transition period. My long-term plans will depend on how honestly these agreements are implemented. The board voted unanimously to accept the compromise. As the meeting adjourned, an uneasy truce settled over the room. We had reached resolution without true reconciliation, a business solution to what was, at its core, a human problem. Thomas approached as I gathered my papers. You planned this perfectly, didn't you? Waiting until I'd left, then undermining everything I built. Thomas, I sighed, suddenly weary of the conflict. After 40 years, how can you still not understand? I never wanted to take anything from you. I just couldn't let you take everything from me. You turned Amber against me, he accused, though his voice carried more bewilderment than anger now. I told her the truth. Her decisions are her own. I met his gaze. Just as you'll need to face the truth of what drove her away. As I walked toward the door, Rebecca Winters fell into step beside me. That was masterfully handled, Eleanor. Not masterfully enough, I acknowledged. I miscalculated Thomas's ownership structure. Yet you still achieved your primary goals. She smiled knowingly. The company will survive this transition, largely thanks to you. Again. Outside Anderson Tower, spring sunshine warmed the city streets. Pedestrians hurried past, oblivious to the corporate drama that had unfolded above. I paused on the plaza, looking up at the gleaming building that housed the company Thomas and I had built together. My phone chimed with a text message. Amber. Coffee tomorrow? Same place, same time. I smiled faintly as I typed my reply. I'll be there. Whatever came next, for Anderson Enterprises, for Thomas, for Amber, for me, one thing was certain. The story would finally be told truthfully. After 40 years, that was victory enough. The weeks following the board meeting unfolded, with calculated precision, like pieces moving across a chessboard. The company issued a carefully worded press release announcing my official recognition as co-founder of Anderson Enterprises and acknowledging my significant contributions to the company's growth and innovation. Financial analysts noted the unusual timing, but most accepted the explanation that the approaching 40th anniversary had prompted a review of corporate history. Thomas and I maintained a professional distance, interacting only when absolutely necessary during executive meetings. The tension between us remained palpable but controlled, like a fault line that had shifted but not fully ruptured. Amber surprised me. Rather than distancing herself from the situation, she immersed herself in learning everything she could about the company's foundations. Our morning coffee meetings became a regular occurrence 3 times weekly. Sometimes we discussed strategy and operations. Other times, she asked about the early years, how Thomas and I had navigated challenges, built client relationships, made pivotal decisions. You've never asked about my relationship with Thomas, she noted one morning, 6 weeks after the board meeting. We sat at our usual corner table at Rosedale Cafe, the early summer sunshine streaming through the windows. It's not my business, I replied, stirring honey into my tea, a habit I'd adopted from her. But you must be curious. She studied me over the rim of her cup. Most women would be. I've found curiosity about former spouses' new relationships rarely leads anywhere productive. I smiled faintly. Besides, I think I can guess the outlines. She raised an eyebrow. Oh? Thomas pursued you intensely, made you feel unique among all the people he could have chosen. He shared confidences, sought your opinion on matters others weren't consulted about, made you feel like a partner. Something flickered in her eyes. That's surprisingly accurate. It's how he operated with me, too. Thomas needs admiration like most people need oxygen. She set down her cup, her usual composure slipping momentarily. We're no longer together, if you were wondering. It ended the day after the board meeting. His decision or yours? Mutual. If such things ever truly are. She straightened a sugar packet that didn't need straightening. He couldn't forgive what he saw as betrayal. I couldn't unsee the pattern of deception you revealed. I nodded, understanding all too well. And professionally? I'm staying through the transition as agreed. What happens after depends on the new CEO. You're still a candidate? The search committee has encouraged me to remain in consideration. Her confidence returned as the conversation shifted to business, though I'm approaching it differently, now. Less focused on proving myself, more on whether the role truly aligns with my strengths. Growth looks good on you, I observed. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I had an unexpected mentor. Our coffee meetings became the foundation of an unlikely alliance. Amber possessed raw talent and ambition that reminded me of myself 4 decades earlier. I offered perspective and institutional knowledge she couldn't gain elsewhere. We were neither friends nor mere colleagues, but something uniquely valuable to us both. July brought the formal announcement of my appointment to the board of directors. The same week, pattern track documentation was updated to correctly attribute its primary development to me, with Thomas acknowledged for business implementation. The changes were handled quietly, without fanfare, as stipulated in our agreement. Thomas, meanwhile, had adopted a strategy of dignified detachment. He performed his CEO duties with professional competence while distancing himself from the company's revised narrative. In executive meetings, he referred to decisions made by leadership rather than claiming personal credit, a subtle but significant shift. His personal interactions with me remained minimal until the final week of July, when he appeared at my office doorway late one afternoon. The setting sun cast long shadows across the space I had recently redecorated, replacing the masculine leather and dark wood with lighter colors and contemporary art. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, his tone deliberately neutral. Of course. I gestured to the visitor chairs, noting how strange it felt to have him as a guest in what had once been our shared domain. He sat stiffly, surveying the changed office. The executive search committee has narrowed to 3 final candidates for CEO. I'm aware. I received the same update. 2 external, 1 internal. He met my eyes directly. Amber. She's highly qualified. That's not in question. He leaned forward slightly. The board is leaning toward her appointment. I know that as well. I am on the board now, Thomas, which is precisely why I'm here. His fingers drummed once against the armrest before he stilled them. Your influence could be decisive. I studied him carefully, trying to discern his agenda. Are you asking me to oppose her nomination? I'm asking what your plans are. My plans? For Anderson Enterprises. For your role going forward, for... He hesitated. For what happens next? Understanding dawned. You think I've been positioning Amber as my proxy, that I intend to control the company through her. He didn't deny it. The thought has occurred to me. You two have become quite collaborative. I almost laughed at the irony. Thomas, who had spent decades centralizing control, assumed everyone operated with the same motivation. I have no interest in controlling the company, Thomas. I never did. That was always your priority. Then what do you want? Genuine confusion colored his voice. Exactly what I started from the beginning. Recognition for my contributions and the integrity of our legacy. And Amber? These daily meetings, the mentoring, that's just generous knowledge transfer? Skepticism laced his tone. I see potential in her, not as my puppet, but as a leader who might avoid our mistakes. I met his gaze steadily, including my mistake of allowing contributions to go unacknowledged and yours of believing you succeeded alone. He absorbed this in silence, the late afternoon light casting half his face in shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an unfamiliar note of reflection. Did you know I've been approached about writing a memoir? The Anderson Method, Building a Business Empire from Vision to Legacy. Sounds grandiose. I couldn't keep the dryness from my tone. I declined. He straightened his already perfect tie. Any honest account would now have to include recent developments. You mean the truth? I mean complications. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. A narrative with you as co-creator lacks the clarity publishers want. Reality rarely provides the clean storylines people prefer, I observed. That doesn't make it less true. No. He stood, preparing to leave. But it does require rethinking 40 years of personal history. That's challenging. I imagine it would be. I remained seated, unwilling to ease his discomfort. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I never intended to erase you from the story. I just became accustomed to telling it my way. Intentions matter less than impact, Thomas. That's something I had to learn too. After he left, I sat watching the sunset paint Pittsburgh's skyline in shades of amber and gold. His visit revealed something I hadn't fully appreciated. While I had found liberation in finally claiming my place in our shared history, Thomas was struggling to reconstruct his identity around this new reality. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to my home, Melissa, our daughter, arriving, unannounced from San Francisco. I had meetings with clients in New York, she explained as she set her suitcase in the foyer. Thought I'd detour to Pittsburgh before heading back. See how you're doing with all this upheaval. At 37, Melissa had grown into a formidable woman, brilliant, direct, accomplished in her own right as an environmental attorney. She had Thomas's analytical mind and my intuitive understanding of human dynamics, a combination that made her both a devastating litigator and occasionally challenging daughter. The guest room is made up, I told her, hiding my pleasure at her surprise visit behind practical matters. Have you eaten? Airport food. I'm starving. She followed me to the kitchen. So, a corporate revolutionary at 63. That's a plot twist I didn't see coming. I smiled as I retrieved ingredients from the refrigerator. Life rarely follows expected narratives. Speaking of narratives, Dad called me last night. She perched on a bar stool at the kitchen island. He sounded disoriented. Keep talking about legacy and perception. He's struggling to reconcile his self-image with recent revelations. I began chopping vegetables for an impromptu pasta. That's to be expected. Are you enjoying his discomfort? Her question held no judgment, just curiosity. I considered it honestly. Not enjoying, no, but I won't pretend I'm devastated by it either. Fair. She snagged a piece of bell pepper from the cutting board. What about Amber? Jonathan says you've taken her under your wing, which seems bizarre considering the circumstances. Life is full of unexpected alliances. I added olive oil to the heated pan. She's intelligent, capable, and now free of Thomas's influence. I see no reason to waste potential out of personal grievance. Melissa studied me with the penetrating gaze she typically reserved for hostile witnesses. You've changed, Mom. There's a directness to you now. It's refreshing. Not changed. Reverted, perhaps. The vegetables sizzled as they hit the pan. To someone I was before compromise became a habit. We talked late into the night. About the company, about Thomas, about the subtle recalibration of family dynamics. Melissa asked probing questions about the early years of Anderson Enterprises, seeming to reassess her own understanding of her parents' partnership. I always saw Dad as the driving force, she admitted, as we shared the last of a bottle of Cabernet. You were the steady presence, the supportive spouse. I never questioned that narrative. Few did, I replied without bitterness. It was convenient, familiar, reinforced by 1,000 small interactions. I sometimes even forget it wasn't entirely accurate. Well, I'm glad you remembered. She raised her glass in a small toast. Better late than never. The CEO selection process concluded in early September. The board voted 17-6 to offer the position to Amber, who accepted with a 5-year contract. Thomas announced his early retirement, effective immediately rather than completing the transition period. The press release cited his desire to explore new opportunities and personal interests, language so generic it practically screamed of deeper stories left untold. On Amber's first official day as CEO, I arrived at the office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a vintage Mont Blanc fountain pen with a note in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. For signing your own name to history from now on. T. The gesture surprised me. An acknowledgement, however small, that something fundamental had shifted between us. I placed the pen in my drawer, uncertain whether it represented genuine recognition or merely strategic reconciliation. That afternoon, Amber convened her first executive meeting as CEO. The boardroom felt different with her at the head of the table instead of Thomas, not just the physical arrangement, but the energy. She began by acknowledging the company's joint founders and expressing commitment to building on the foundation laid by both Eleanor Mitchell and Thomas Anderson. As the meeting progressed, I observed her leadership style with professional interest. She balanced decisiveness with collaborative discussion, challenged assumptions without dismissing experience, navigated competing perspectives with natural diplomacy. She had clearly studied both Thomas's strengths and his weaknesses, incorporating the former while avoiding the latter. When she outlined her strategic priorities for the first quarter, PatternTrack featured prominently, not as surveillance technology, but as an enhanced consumer insights platform with new ethical frameworks built directly into its architecture. Eleanor will lead this initiative, Amber announced. Her original vision for the technology always included ethical guardrails that we're now implementing formally. Heads turned toward me with varied expressions: surprise, curiosity, respect. For decades, my contributions had been acknowledged primarily within the privacy of strategy sessions. Public attribution felt both foreign and validating. After the meeting, Rebecca Winters caught up with me in the hallway. "Look at you," she smiled. "Co-founder, board member, and now innovation lead. Quite a transformation in 6 months." "Less transformation than revelation," I corrected gently. "These were always my capacities. They're just visible now." "Well, visibility suits you." She squeezed my arm lightly. Though I imagine Thomas is struggling with his sudden invisibility, her observation proved prescient. Over the following months, Thomas retreated from Pittsburgh's business community, spending increasing time at his lake house in the Poconos. Rumors circulated about potential new ventures, consulting roles, board appointments, but nothing materialized publicly. Our paths crossed occasionally at charity events or industry functions. We maintained civil interactions, exchanging pleasantries about mutual acquaintances or our children's activities. Neither of us mentioned Anderson Enterprises directly, though it remained the invisible center around which our orbits were defined. In December, 6 months after the board meeting that had changed everything, Thomas requested lunch. We met at Aisaicho's Carlton's, an old guard steakhouse downtown where we had once celebrated major client wins and company milestones. "You're looking well," he said as we were seated, and seemed genuinely to mean it. "Thank you. Retirement agrees with you." It wasn't entirely true. He appeared more rested but somehow diminished. A planet knocked slightly off its axis. After ordering, he addressed what I assumed was the purpose of our meeting. "I've decided to sell my remaining shares in Anderson Enterprises." This was significant news. Despite our agreement, Thomas had retained his ownership position, his last tangible connection to the company. "To whom?" I asked. "A private investment group. The deal includes a 10-year non-compete and confidentiality provisions about company operations." He took a sip of water. I thought you should hear it from me rather than through corporate channels. I appreciate that. I studied him, curious about his motivation. May I ask why now? He considered his response carefully. It's time to fully disconnect, for them and for me. And your plans? Montana, he said, surprising me. I've purchased property near Bozeman, planning to build a house, maybe do some writing, definitely no consulting. That's unexpected. A hint of his old smile emerged. Occasionally, I can still manage that. Our conversation through lunch remained cordial, touching on neutral topics. Jonathan's recent promotion, Melissa's environmental lawsuit victory, mutual friends from the early days of our career. Only as dessert arrived did Thomas broach more personal territory. I've been thinking about the question you asked during our separation, he said, meticulously dividing his crème brûlée with a spoon. About what was necessary. I waited, allowing him the space to continue. None of it was, really. Not taking credit for your work. Not, he hesitated. Not Amber. Not the way things ended. He looked up, briefly meeting my eyes. I've had to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths about myself. That's rarely a pleasant process, I observed. No. He set down his spoon. But perhaps an overdue one. As we prepared to leave, I found myself offering an unexpected invitation. Jonathan and Melissa will be home for Christmas week. Sunday dinner is at my house, if you'd care to join us. Surprise registered on his face, followed by cautious gratitude. I'd like that. Outside the restaurant, standing on Forbes Avenue as winter clouds threatened snow, we faced each other as something neither adversaries nor exactly friends, former partners recalibrating a relationship that had defined most of our lives. I underestimated you, Eleanor, he said, adjusting his scarf against the chill. Perhaps I always did. Perhaps, I agreed, but possibly less than I underestimated myself. We parted ways there, Thomas toward his downtown apartment, me toward Anderson Tower, where an afternoon meeting awaited. Looking up at the building that housed our shared legacy, I felt a complex peace settle over me. The empire we had built, together, would continue evolving without either of us at its center, carrying forward both our names in proper proportion. Sometimes justice arrives late. Sometimes recognition comes after decades of patience. Sometimes reclaiming your story means rewriting its ending. After 40 years, I had finally signed my name to the narrative I helped create, not erasing Thomas's contributions, but rightfully claiming my own. As snow began falling softly around me, I walked into the future I had helped make possible, my footprints marking a path distinctly my own. Spring arrived in Pittsburgh with unusual warmth, coaxing cherry blossoms along the Allegheny River into premature bloom. 1 year had passed since Thomas moved out, 10 months since the board meeting that redefined my place in Anderson Enterprises. The company thrived under Amber's leadership, exceeding first-quarter projections by 17% and successfully launching Pattern Track 5.0 with the ethical frameworks I had championed. My role had evolved into something uniquely suited to my strengths, special advisor on innovation and corporate legacy. 3 days weekly in the office, consulting on strategic initiatives while documenting the company's authentic history for our upcoming 40th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of having my contributions minimized, I was now literally writing them into the official record. On a mild April morning, I arrived at headquarters to find Janice, Amber's executive assistant, waiting by the elevator. Ms. Mitchell, there's been a change to your schedule. Ms. Donovan would like you to join her for the Westbrook meeting instead of the Innovation Committee. Westbrook Hotels, our first major client, the account that had put Anderson Advertising on the map 4 decades earlier. They remained one of our most significant relationships, though their current leadership bore no connection to the executives Thomas and I had initially impressed with our Discover the Difference campaign. Did she mention why? Only that it's urgent. Their CEO flew in unexpectedly this morning. I found Amber in her office, formerly Thomas's, now transformed with her own aesthetic. Gone were the heavy mahogany furnishings and leather club chairs, replaced by sleek modern pieces and a stunning glass conference table. She paced near the windows, tension evident in her posture. "Eleanor, thank you for coming." She gestured to the sitting area. "We have a situation with Westbrook." "What kind of situation?" "The concerning kind. Harrison Wade took over as CEO 3 months ago. Young, aggressive, making his mark through cost-cutting and vendor consolidation." She glanced at her watch. "He's asked for a comprehensive review of all their marketing partnerships." "Which means we're being evaluated for potential replacement," I concluded. "Precisely. Their contract represents 8% of our annual revenue and significant prestige value." "When is the meeting?" 30 minutes. Nathan is pulling performance metrics now." She hesitated. "I asked for you specifically because I was there from the beginning," I finished for her. She nodded. "Wade is apparently big on authentic brand storytelling. I thought your perspective might resonate." "What's our strategy?" "Lead with innovation, pattern track insights, cross-platform integration, international expansion opportunities." Her fingers tapped restlessly against the armrest. "Standard retention approach." I considered this, thinking back to that first Westbrook pitch when we were still a scrappy upstart agency. That's not how we won them initially. "How did you win them?" "By understanding what made them unique when everyone else treated them as interchangeable with other hotel chains." I smiled at the memory. Thomas and I spent a night in each of their 7 original locations before pitching. We didn't talk about metrics or reach. We talked about the locally sourced blueberries in their Minneapolis breakfast buffet and the hand-carved headboards crafted by Vermont artisans for their Burlington property. Amber's expression shifted from concern to interest. Personalization. Before it became an industry buzzword. Exactly. They weren't selling rooms. They were selling distinctive experiences that happened to include comfortable beds. We spent the next 20 minutes reviewing Westbrook's recent marketing campaigns, identifying how they'd drifted toward standardization despite their heritage of local character. When Harrison Wade arrived, impeccably tailored, analytically, cold, trailing 2 consultants armed with spreadsheets, we were prepared. "Mr. Wade," Amber greeted him with professional warmth, "welcome to Anderson Enterprises. I'd like to introduce Eleanor Mitchell, our co-founder and the architect of the original Westbrook Hotels partnership." His handshake was perfunctory. "Ms. Mitchell, I wasn't aware you were still active with the firm." "Institutional memory is a competitive advantage, Mr. Wade," I replied with a smile, "particularly with valued partners like Westbrook." The meeting began with his team's presentation, charts highlighting marketing expenditures versus occupancy rates, comparisons with competing chains, cost per acquisition analyses. The subtext was clear. Anderson Enterprises was expensive relative to newer, more digitally focused agencies. When they finished, Amber nodded respectfully. "Thank you for that thorough analysis. Before we respond with our metrics, I'd like Eleanor to share something with you." I opened a portfolio containing something I'd retrieved from archives that morning, the original mock-ups for Westbrook's Discover the Difference campaign from 1988. Westbrook hired us 36 years ago because every other agency pitched them on how to compete with Marriott and Hilton, I began. We pitched them on how to be distinctively Westbrook. The DNA of your brand isn't standardization, it's curated individuality. Wade's expression remained impassive, but I noticed his consultants exchanging glances. "Your Burlington property still features those Vermont-crafted headboards, though they've been refurbished twice. Your Minneapolis chef still sources blueberries from the same family farm, now run by the founder's granddaughter. These details matter. They're why your customer satisfaction scores consistently outperform chains with larger marketing budgets." I slid the vintage designs across the table. Your current challenges aren't about marketing efficiency, they're about brand dilution. For the first time, interest flickered in Wade's eyes. Elaborate. Your promotional materials increasingly emphasize points programs and standardized amenities, areas where larger chains will always outspend you. Meanwhile, you've minimized the unique local partnerships and distinctive design elements that differentiated Westbrook from its inception. Amber seamlessly picked up the thread. We've prepared an alternative approach that aligns with Westbrook's heritage while incorporating cutting-edge analytics. She launched into our country strategy, a return to location-specific storytelling, powered by Pattern Track's ability to match unique property features with targeted customer microsegments. As she spoke, the energy in the room gradually shifted. Wade stopped checking his phone. The consultants closed their laptops. By meeting's end, we hadn't secured a definitive commitment, but Wade's parting words suggested a reprieve. This perspective is refreshing. Let's schedule a follow-up next week to explore this heritage-forward approach. After they departed, Amber exhaled deeply. That was masterful, Eleanor. You completely changed the conversation. I simply remembered what worked before. Sometimes innovation means rediscovering your foundations. She smiled, recognizing her own words from a recent leadership meeting. Speaking of foundations, the 40th Anniversary Gala Planning Committee would like your input on the historical displays. Of course, though I'm still getting used to being visibly part of the story. Better late than never. She gathered her materials. By the way, have you spoken with Thomas recently? Not since Christmas. He's been in Montana, building his house. Why? Just curious. The invitations for the gala went out yesterday. I wondered if he'd respond. The 40th anniversary celebration of Anderson Enterprises had transformed from a standard corporate milestone to something more significant. The first official commemoration of the company's co-founding by both Thomas and me. The planning committee had embraced the corrected narrative, designing historical displays that accurately depicted our complementary contributions. Whether Thomas would attend remained uncertain. Our Christmas dinner with Jonathan and Melissa had been cordial but constrained, weighed by 4 decades of habits not easily discarded. Since then, our communication has been limited to occasional text messages about practical matters, tax documents, property inquiries, mutual friends. 2 days after the Westbrook meeting, an email from Thomas appeared in my inbox. The subject line read simply, Gala. Eleanor, I received the invitation to the 40th anniversary celebration. I'm uncertain whether my presence would be appropriate or welcome. This is the company's first major event under Amber's leadership and the first to officially recognize your rightful place as co-founder. My attendance might divert attention from both these significant developments. Please advise your preference. I will respect whatever you decide. Thomas P.S. The Montana House is finally taking shape. Clear views of the Bridgers from every window. You would appreciate the light. His deference to my preference represented a profound shift from the man who had made unilateral decisions throughout our marriage. I considered my response carefully before typing. Thomas Anderson Enterprises was built by both of us. The anniversary should reflect that complete history, including your presence. The narrative doesn't need to erase you to include me. That was the mistake we made in reverse for too many years. I think you should attend, Eleanor P.S. The light in Montana always was extraordinary. I'm glad you're finding peace there, his reply. Came within minutes. Then I'll be there. The weeks leading to the gala accelerated with meetings, interviews for the anniversary publication, and final preparations for the historical exhibition. Journalists who had long profiled Thomas as sole visionary now requested my perspective on the company's evolution. The narrative was gradually rebalancing, not by diminishing his contributions, but by properly acknowledging mine. The evening of the gala arrived with perfect early summer weather. The event occupied the grand ballroom at the Fairmont, transformed with displays chronicling Anderson Enterprises' growth from small advertising agency to global consultancy. Photographs from our first office hung alongside interactive timelines of major campaigns and innovations. Pattern Track's development featured prominently, with my original design notebooks displayed beneath protective glass. I arrived early to review the exhibitions, pausing before a newly discovered photograph I hadn't seen in decades. Thomas and me standing before our first office sign, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with the exhilarating combination of exhaustion and triumph that marked those early days. "They found that in the archives," Amber's voice came from behind me. She looked elegant in a midnight blue gown, her CEO persona firmly in place. The curation team thought it captured something essential about the founding partnership. I studied our younger selves, the ambition in Thomas's stance, the quiet determination in my eyes. They weren't wrong. The ballroom gradually filled with executives, long-term clients, board members, and city leaders. I circulated among them, accepting congratulations and sharing anecdotes from the company's evolution. Rebecca Winters found me near the bar, champagne in hand. "The narrative correction is complete," she observed, gesturing toward a display where my patent applications for Pattern Track's core algorithms were prominently featured. "How does it feel?" "Validating," I admitted. "Though occasionally surreal. I've grown accustomed to invisibility." "Well, get unaccustomed," she replied briskly. "Visibility becomes you." She glanced toward the entrance. "And speaking of visibility," Thomas had arrived, distinguished in a tailored tuxedo, silver hair contrasting with the black fabric. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and accepting greetings from former colleagues. I watched him navigate the social choreography he had always excelled at, noting the occasional double takes when attendees spotted the historical displays with their revised attributions. Our eyes met across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, he made his way toward me. "Eleanor?" He nodded formally. "The exhibitions are impressive. The company has done an excellent job documenting its complete history." "Thank you." The research team was thorough. An awkward silence descended before Rebecca tactfully excused herself. Thomas glanced around, taking in the elaborately staged environment. "Strange being a guest rather than a host," he observed. "Even strangers seeing certain campaigns attributed to you publicly after all these years." "Change is rarely comfortable," I acknowledged, "but often necessary." He nodded slowly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking in Montana about patterns and how difficult they are to recognize when you're embedded in them." Before I could respond, Amber approached the podium, calling for attention. The crowd quieted as she welcomed everyone to the celebration, her opening remarks highlighting the company's resilience through economic cycles and market transformations. "Anderson Enterprises wasn't built on a single vision but on a powerful partnership," she continued. "Tonight, we honor both Thomas Anderson and Eleanor Mitchell for creating the foundation upon which we continue to build." She invited us both to the stage, a moment I hadn't anticipated. Thomas gestured for me to precede him, a small courtesy that nonetheless registered as significant. Standing together before the assembled company, we received the applause with matching expressions of professional dignity. "Would either of our founders care to share a few words?" Amber asked, offering the microphone. Thomas deferred to me with a slight nod. Taking the microphone, I surveyed the faces looking up expectantly. Employees whose careers I had shaped, clients whose businesses had grown alongside ours, friends who had witnessed our journey. 40 years ago, Thomas and I stood in an empty warehouse space in the Strip District, imagining what it could become, I began. We had different strengths, different perspectives, different approaches to problem solving. What made Anderson Enterprises successful wasn't uniformity of thought, but the creative tension of diverse viewpoints unified by shared purpose. I glanced at Thomas, who was listening intently. Over the years, that founding partnership evolved, in ways both productive and occasionally problematic. The narrative simplified, as narratives tend to do. Complexity got lost. Attribution became unbalanced. But tonight isn't about correcting past imbalances. It's about acknowledging that great achievements rarely spring from solitary genius. They emerge from collaboration, from the friction of different ideas striking against each other until something new ignites. I handed the microphone to Thomas, curious about how he would respond to this framing. He accepted it with a thoughtful expression. "Eleanor's perspective is, as always, insightful," he began. "For many years, I accepted and even encouraged a narrative that placed me at the center of Anderson Enterprises' success story. That narrative was incomplete." Murmurs rippled through the audience at this unexpected acknowledgement. "The truth is more nuanced and, frankly, more interesting," he continued. "Eleanor's strategic vision complemented my operational focus. Her creative insight balanced my market pragmatism. Pattern Track, the innovation that transformed us from advertising agency to global consultancy, emerged primarily from her understanding of consumer behavior patterns that I hadn't recognized." He turned slightly toward me. "I was fortunate to have such a partner for 4 decades, professionally if not always personally. Anderson Enterprises bears both our imprints, and its future success under Amber's leadership will build on foundations that were, indeed, laid by both of us." The applause that followed carried notes of surprise and appreciation. As we left the stage, Thomas leaned closer to speak privately. "I hope that was acceptable. I've been practicing some version of it since receiving your email." "It was unexpected," I admitted. "But welcome." Later, as the evening wound toward its conclusion, we found ourselves momentarily alone in a quiet corner of the ballroom. The familiar strains of a Glenn Miller orchestra piece, popular during our early years together, drifted from the band. "Would you humor an old tradition?" Thomas asked, gesturing toward the dance floor where couples moved in elegant patterns. "For old time's sake?" I hesitated, weighing the complicated emotions his request stirred. Then, deciding that some gestures of reconciliation deserved acceptance, I nodded. We moved together with the muscle memory of decades, his hand at the proper position on my back, mine resting lightly on his shoulder. The steps came naturally, though the tension between us had transformed from the electric connection of our youth to something more complex and weathered. "You seem at peace," he observed as we navigated the floor. "I am," I confirmed. "Truth has that effect. Even when it arrives belatedly?" "Especially then. The longer the wait, the greater the release." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that conversation we had after the settlement. You asked what was necessary. I never gave you a proper answer. And now? Now I understand none of it was. The credit-taking, the gradual erasure, the other things." He executed a perfect turn, momentarily avoiding my gaze. "They were choices, not necessities. Poor ones, as it turned out." The music shifted to a slower tempo. We adjusted accordingly, maintaining a respectful distance while continuing our conversation. "What will you do now?" I asked. "In Montana, I mean." "Right, perhaps. Not the self-aggrandizing memoir I was offered, but something more reflective, about partnerships and patterns, about seeing clearly what was always there." The song concluded. We stepped apart, the momentary connection dissolving back into our separate realities. Across the room, I spotted Amber deep in conversation with Harrison Wade from Westbrook Hotels, her animated gestures suggesting successful negotiations. "She's quite remarkable," Thomas commented, following my gaze. "I can see why you invested in her development, despite the circumstances." "Talent transcends personal complications," I replied. Another lesson from 40 years in business, as the gala concluded. Guests departed with commemorative books documenting the company's history, the revised version that accurately represented both founders' contributions. Thomas and I found ourselves walking out together, a happenstance that felt both awkward and oddly fitting. Outside, the Pittsburgh night spread before us, the three rivers converging in darkness punctuated by the lights of bridges and buildings, many of which housed businesses we had helped shape over 4 decades. "Will you be staying in town?" I asked as the valet brought our respective cars. "Just tonight, flying back to Montana tomorrow." He hesitated before adding, "I've found I prefer the quiet there. Less history embedded in every street corner." Understood perfectly. Pittsburgh held our shared past in every familiar building and restaurant, every client office and meeting place. Sometimes distance was necessary for perspective. As we prepared to part ways, Thomas extended his hand formally. "Thank you for suggesting I attend tonight. It was important to see the story told properly at last." I accepted his handshake, a businesslike conclusion to an evening that had unexpectedly bridged personal and professional divides. Safe travels, Thomas. Driving home along familiar streets, I reflected on the symmetry of the evening. 40. Years after founding a company together, Thomas and I had stood on stage and acknowledged both our successful partnership and its eventual fractures. Neither the achievements nor the failures belonged to either of us alone. They were the complex product of 2 lives intertwined through decades of ambition, compromise, and ultimately, truth. The company would continue evolving under new leadership. Thomas would build his Montana sanctuary. I would balance board responsibilities with newfound freedom. Our paths had diverged permanently, yet remained connected through the legacy we had created, now properly attributed to us both. The validation had come later than it should have, but perhaps exactly when I needed it most. At 63, I had reclaimed not just credit for past achievements, but the narrative authority to shape whatever chapters remained. After 40 years, that was perhaps the most meaningful victory of all. 18 months after the gala, autumn painted Pittsburgh in vibrant hues. The morning air carried the first hint of winter as I pulled into the parking lot of Allegheny Medical Center. The familiar weight of anticipation and concern settled in my chest as I made my way to the oncology ward. Thomas had called 3 weeks earlier with news that changed everything: stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis had come after persistent back pain during his Montana cabin renovations. By the time doctors identified the cause, the disease had already spread to nearby lymph nodes. "I'd like to come back to Pittsburgh for treatment," he'd said, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. "The specialists at Allegheny are among the best." The unspoken question hung between us, where he would stay during treatment. Without hesitation, I'd offered the guest suite in my home. Our children lived on opposite coasts with demanding careers. They couldn't provide daily support. Whatever had transpired between us, 40 years of shared history created obligations that transcended marital status. Room 412 was awash in morning light when I arrived. Thomas sat in a recliner by the window, already dressed in casual clothes rather than a hospital gown. At 66, cancer had accelerated his aging, his frame thinner, cheekbones more prominent, eyes slightly sunken. Yet his posture remained, upright, his gaze alert. "Good news," he announced as I entered. "They're releasing me today. The first round of chemo didn't shrink the tumors as much as they hoped, but my blood work is stable enough for outpatient treatment." I set down the small duffel bag containing fresh clothes and toiletries I'd brought in case his stay was extended. "That's encouraging. The guest room is ready whenever you are." "Eleanor," he hesitated. "Are you certain about this arrangement? Jonathan offered to take leave from his firm and Melissa—" "Our children have their own lives," I interjected gently. "The guest suite has a separate entrance. You'll have privacy and independence, plus someone nearby if complications arise. It's the practical solution." "Practical," he echoed with a faint smile. That was always your forte. An hour later, after discharge paperwork and medication instructions, we drove through familiar neighborhoods toward Fox Chapel. The colonial-style house I'd kept in the divorce settlement welcomed us with golden light filtering through maple trees that had been saplings when we first moved in. "You've maintained it beautifully," Thomas observed as we pulled into the circular driveway. "Some things are worth preserving," I replied, helping him with his bags despite his protests. The guest suite occupied the east wing, a bedroom, sitting area, and private bath originally designed for Thomas's parents' extended visits. Now it would serve as his sanctuary during treatment. I'd stocked the small refrigerator with the protein shakes his nutritionist recommended and arranged his medications. On the bedside table, "I've cleared space in the closet and dresser," I explained, setting down his suitcase. "The Wi-Fi password is on the desk. Let me know if you need anything else." He surveyed the space with an unreadable expression. "Why are you doing this, Eleanor? After everything?" The question deserved an honest answer. "Because kindness shouldn't be contingent on perfect behavior. Because 40 years creates connections that legal documents can't sever. Because—" I paused, finding the right words. "Because I would hope someone would do the same for me." His eyes held mine for a long moment before he nodded. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, we established a careful rhythm. Thomas attended chemotherapy, sessions 3 times weekly. I drove him when fatigue was too severe, but otherwise he maintained independence. We shared occasional meals at the kitchen island, discussing neutral topics: Jonathan's engagement to his longtime girlfriend, Melissa's environmental law victory, developments at Anderson Enterprises under Amber's leadership. The company continued, thriving without either of us at its helm. Pattern Track 6.0 had launched to industry acclaim, incorporating ethical frameworks I'd designed and marketing strategies Thomas had pioneered. Our joint legacy endured, even as we navigated this unexpected final chapter of our personal story. One evening in late November, I found Thomas in the sunroom, wrapped in a blanket despite the heating system, staring out at the bare trees illuminated by landscape lighting. "May I join you?" I asked, carrying 2 mugs of herbal tea. He gestured to the adjacent chair. "It's your house." "It was our house first," I reminded him, settling into the comfortable seat. "For 37 years. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but contemplative. Outside, a deer cautiously emerged from the wooded area behind the property, scanning for danger before lowering her head to graze. "I've been thinking about regret," Thomas said finally. "Not just about us, though that's part of it. About patterns we create through thousands of small choices until they seem inevitable, rather than constructed." I sipped my tea, allowing him space to continue. "The narrative I built, successful businessman, visionary founder, self-made man, it wasn't entirely false, but it was incomplete in ways that damaged what mattered most." He turned to face me directly. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, for the credit I took, the recognition I denied you, the partnership I diminished. Most of all, for believing my own mythology so completely that I thought I could discard our marriage without consequence." The apology, so long awaited, arrived with a bittersweet timing. "Why now, Thomas?" "Because cancer has a way of stripping pretense," he replied simply, "and because you deserve to hear it, whether or not you choose to accept it." I considered his words carefully. "I accept your apology, and I offer one of my own." Surprise flickered across his features. For what? For allowing it to happen. For prioritizing harmony over truth. For not claiming my place sooner. I set down my mug. "We both constructed that narrative, Thomas. You by taking more credit than was due, me by accepting less." The deer outside raised her head suddenly, alert to some unseen movement, before, darting back into the protective darkness of the woods. "Do you think we would have lasted if I hadn't left?" Thomas asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than defensive. Impossible to know, I answered honestly. We might have continued indefinitely, in our established patterns, or the imbalance might have eventually collapsed under its own weight. Either way, I handled it poorly. Yes, I agreed without rancor. You did? His laugh was unexpected, a brief, genuine sound of appreciation for my directness. At least cancer hasn't softened your honesty. Would you prefer platitudes? Never. He adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. That was always your greatest value to me, personally and professionally. You saw reality clearly when I preferred convenient fiction. December brought deterioration despite aggressive treatment. Thomas lost weight rapidly, his once commanding presence diminishing physically while somehow intensifying in other ways. As his body weakened, a new clarity emerged in his interactions, with me, with our children during their visits, with the few close friends he allowed to see him in this condition. One snowy evening, I heard classical music drifting from his eye. Sweet, Dvořák's New World Symphony, which we had attended during our honeymoon in New York. Following the sound, I found his door ajar, Thomas seated by the window watching snowflakes swirl in the security lights. He gestured for me to enter. I was just revisiting some memories. Good ones, I hope. The best ones, he confirmed, before ambition complicated everything. I sat across from him, noting the photos spread across his lap, our wedding, early office celebrations, children's birthdays, vacation snapshots, moments captured from a shared life that had produced both remarkable success and profound failure. I've made arrangements, he said without preamble, for when things progress. Thomas, no, Eleanor. We need to discuss this practically. His tone brooked no argument. My will directs most assets to the children, with substantial donations to cancer research. But there's something specific I wanted to tell you directly. He handed me an envelope. I've transferred my remaining shares in Anderson Enterprises to you. 10% of the company, held in a blind trust since our divorce. It should have been yours all along. The gesture stunned me. I don't need... It's not about need, he interrupted gently. It's about restoration. What was improperly taken should be returned. Outside, snow continued falling, each flake unique and transient against the darkness. Inside, something shifted between us, not erasing the past, but acknowledging it fully while offering what healing remained possible. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded once, turning back to the window. I once believed legacy was about buildings, with my name on them, articles praising my vision, awards displayed in glass cases. Now I understand it's about the truth you leave behind, about making right what you can, while you can. The symphony reached its familiar crescendo, notes soaring with bittersweet intensity. We sat together in companionable silence, two people who had built an empire and lost a marriage, now finding an unexpected grace in life's final movement. In that moment, watching snow transform the landscape into something pure and unwritten, I understood that recognition and reconciliation sometimes arrive in unexpected packages. That truth, however delayed, carries its own power, and that after 40 years, some stories find their proper ending only when we're brave enough to let go of the narratives we've clung to for too long. Spring returned to Pittsburgh, though Thomas didn't. Lived to see the cherry blossoms. He passed peacefully in late February, our children at his bedside, the snow falling gently outside his window. His final weeks had brought a different kind of intimacy between us, not the passionate connection of our youth or the efficient partnership of our prime, but something more essential. Two people who had witnessed each other's highest achievements and deepest failures, now facing the ultimate transition with hard-earned wisdom. The funeral was dignified and well-attended. Business leaders, former clients, and employees from every era of Anderson Enterprises gathered to pay respects. Amber attended with appropriate solemnity, representing the company's present while honoring its past. I delivered a eulogy that acknowledged both Thomas's undeniable gifts and his human complexities. The visionary who could inspire extraordinary loyalty, yet sometimes failed to see the value directly before him. Thomas Anderson understood the power of narrative, I told the assembled mourners. He crafted stories that transformed businesses, changed consumer behavior, and built a company that continues to thrive. If his personal narrative sometimes strayed from the fullest truth, he ultimately found his way back to it. In the end, that may be all any of us can hope for. The courage to recognize our mistakes and the grace to make what amends we can. Afterward, at the reception in my home, Rebecca Winters found me in a quiet moment. "That was extraordinarily generous," she observed, handing me a glass of wine. "Especially given the circumstances of your separation." "Holding grudges requires energy better spent elsewhere," I replied. "Besides, these past months revealed a Thomas I hadn't seen in decades, one capable of genuine reflection. Still," she persisted, "most women wouldn't have opened their home to an ex-husband who left them for someone half their age. Perhaps I'm not most women." I smiled faintly. Or perhaps 40 years creates obligations that transcend personal grievances. Later, that evening after the last guest departed, Jonathan and Melissa joined me in the kitchen. We sat around the island where countless family discussions had unfolded over decades, the familiar setting highlighting their father's absence. "What happens now, Mom?" Jonathan asked, his legal mind already turning toward practical matters. "Life continues," I answered simply. "I have board responsibilities, the Pattern Track Ethics Committee, and my work documenting the company's history." "That's not what he meant," Melissa interjected with characteristic directness. "You spent months caring for Dad after he betrayed you. You put your life on hold. Now that it's over. Now I can focus forward without unfinished business behind me," I completed her thought. "There's something freeing in that." Jonathan studied me thoughtfully. "You seem at peace with all of it. The divorce, the company recognition, even Dad's illness. Peace comes from truth, not from perfect circumstances," I told him. "For years, I accepted a narrative that diminished my contributions. When I finally claimed my rightful place, I reclaimed something essential in myself. Everything since has been realignment." The conversation drifted to memories, funny stories, about Thomas, moments from our children's childhood, traditions we might continue. Laughter mingled with occasional tears, the natural grief process unfolding in the safety of family connection. After they retired to their childhood bedrooms, I sat alone in the garden room, surrounded by plants I had nurtured through decades. Like my marriage, some had thrived while others had failed to flourish despite careful attention. Like my career, some had remained hidden in shadow while others claimed the sunlight. All were part of an ecosystem I had created, imperfect but authentically mine. 3 months after Thomas's funeral, I received an unexpected visitor at my office in Anderson Tower. The receptionist announced Amber Donovan with a note of surprise, as the CEO rarely appeared unscheduled on the executive floor where my office was located. "Eleanor," she greeted me, closing the door behind her. "I hope I'm not interrupting?" "Not at all." I gestured toward the sitting area. "What brings you here?" She took a seat, smoothing her skirt with uncharacteristic nervousness. "I've been offered the CEO position at Meridian Global." The news startled me. Meridian was a major competitor, twice the size of Anderson Enterprises with headquarters in London and Singapore. "Congratulations," I said. "It's an extraordinary opportunity." "I haven't accepted yet." She leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to discuss it with you first." "Why me?" "Because you've become more than a mentor, Eleanor. Your guidance has shaped my leadership approach. Your story changed how I view my own career trajectory." She hesitated. And because I owe you the courtesy of advance notice, given our history, I considered her words carefully. You've led Anderson Enterprises admirably for 2 years. The board would fight to keep you. They've already made a generous counteroffer. She smiled wryly. But this isn't about compensation. It's about growth. At Meridian, I'd oversee operations across 3 continents. Their digital transformation initiative needs exactly the expertise I've developed here. Then it sounds like you've made your decision. Almost. Her gaze met mine directly. There's one more factor. Before accepting, I wanted to confirm you wouldn't consider returning as interim CEO while the board conducts a search. The suggestion caught me completely off guard. Me? Amber? I'm 64. And at the height of your strategic capabilities, she countered. You know this company's DNA better than anyone. The board respects you immensely. It would provide stability during transition while allowing them time for a thorough executive search. I hadn't envisioned returning to operational leadership. My board role and special projects had provided the perfect balance of contribution without daily management responsibilities. Yet something about completing this final circle held undeniable appeal. I'll consider it, I said finally. When does Meridian need your answer? Friday. She stood to leave. For what it's worth, Eleanor, I can't think of a more fitting culmination to your journey with this company. From pushed aside to rightfully acknowledged to ultimately leading. After she departed, I walked to the windows overlooking the Pittsburgh skyline. The city had transformed during the 4 decades of my career, industrial grit giving way to tech campuses and healthcare complexes. Anderson Enterprises had evolved alongside it, adapting to changing markets while maintaining core values. Could I lead the company Thomas and I had founded together? The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades, I had operated in his shadow, content, with influence rather than authority. Now, circumstances offered the very position I had never sought. That evening, I called Rebecca Winters to discuss Amber's suggestion. The symmetry is rather perfect, she observed after listening. You would be accepting the role Thomas always claimed as his exclusive territory. It's not about symmetry or poetic justice, I clarified. It's about whether I'm the right person for this moment in the company's evolution. And are you? I considered the question honestly. For a transition period, yes. I understand where we've been and have a clear vision for where we should go. But long-term leadership should come from someone with a fresh perspective. So you'll do it? For 1 year, I decided. Enough time for a proper executive search without rushing into the wrong appointment. The board approved my appointment unanimously the following week. The press release announced, Eleanor Mitchell, co-founder of Anderson Enterprises, steps into CEO role following Amber Donovan's departure. Business publications noted the unusual circumstance, a founding partner returning to leadership after years away from day-to-day operations. My first official act as CEO was to visit the company archives. In the climate-controlled room housing 4 decades of history, I found the original business plan Thomas and I had written at our kitchen table in 1983. His bold market projections alongside my detailed strategy for differentiation. His ambitious growth targets are balanced by my careful risk assessment, different perspectives creating something stronger than either could produce alone. I placed the document under glass in the executive boardroom with a small plaque reading, Anderson Enterprises, founded in partnership. It would serve as a reminder to future leadership that complementary strengths, properly acknowledged, form the strongest foundation for lasting success. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, I received an invitation to deliver the commencement address at Carnegie Mellon's Business School, standing before hundreds of graduates, young women and men poised to begin their own professional journeys. I shared the wisdom of my unconventional path. Your career will not unfold as you imagine today, I told them. You will make compromises, some wise and others costly. You will achieve victories and weather failures. Through it all, Remember that your contributions deserve recognition. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your place in the story deserves to be acknowledged. The applause washed over me as I concluded. Success isn't measured by whose name appears largest on the door, but by the integrity with which you build what stands behind it. Create value. Speak the truth. Claim your place. The empire you help build should reflect the fullness of who you are. As I left the stage, a young woman approached. Confidence in her stride, determination in her eyes. Ms. Mitchell, your story inspired me to change my senior thesis. I've been researching women entrepreneurs whose contributions were minimized in company histories. An important topic, I acknowledged. What prompted your interest? She smiled. My grandmother built a manufacturing business with my grandfather. In the 1970s, when he sold it, everyone called it his company. She never corrected them publicly, but she told me the real story before she died. I recognized myself in that grandmother, and something of my own journey in this young woman's quest to illuminate hidden truths. Tell her story well, I advised. History belongs to those who document it faithfully. Walking to my car afterward, I felt the satisfaction of completion. The circle that had begun with a young woman seeking recognition had closed with an older woman extending that same recognition to others. The empire Thomas and I built together would continue evolving under leadership yet to come. But its foundation now rested on the complete truth of partnership, of complementary strengths, of shared achievement. After 40 years, that was legacy enough. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.